The recording is in process. All right. So again, welcome everybody. This is Bob Mitchell, your chair. And under certain times, we want to welcome everybody, though we couldn't be there in person to get to meet everyone and introduce ourselves. We want to make it possible for us to still be responsive and communicative and be as social as possible. So everybody is muted for the duration of the presentations. However, if you wish to ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself, again, through that lower menu bar, or to use the chat feature and send a question to either Bill Hoddy or myself, and we'll make sure that that question gets asked and you have an opportunity to respond. So we covered that fine, and so as is usual, usually in our first few minutes of the program, we ask if there are any attendees that might be here for the first time. That's the case. I will unmute so people can very well unmute. Come on. Oh, I can't get the participant list up. This is fantastic. View all. There we go. And I am.
Guy that's doing the main talk.
Oh, anybody here for the first time tonight?
Not the presenter. Yes.
Yes.
Like our business meeting.
I heard it say yes. Who's that?
They're calling in from the Houston chapter.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. I hear you calling in.
I'm calling in from the Houston Bay Area chapter.
Ah, welcome. Well, thank you. What brings you to our event tonight?
Well, we're looking to do the online meetings too, so looking to see how other people are doing it.
Okay. Well, you're going to find that we're probably struggling as much as anybody else because this is our very first time using WebEx. We've had remote capability for the last 12 months using a different but due to some recent stability issues, we decided, well, let's give ASQ WebEx a try. Here we are, and this is the very first event we are using WebEx, so it's still a learning curve to us, but thank you for participating, and welcome to the event. Anybody else out there here for the first time?
Arkansas.
Hi,
Arkansas.
I'm here for the first time. My name is Hannah.
And where are you from, Hannah?
I'm in Phoenix right now.
And here's someone here from Arkansas.
Northwest Arkansas calling in here, section 1413.
Wow, thank you.
I saw your link on the ASQ site, and I'm glad to be on board here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We're glad to have you join us. This is what sections are all about: the building and community practice. And hopefully, we'll be able to enjoy a much broader representation across the continue. So for those who are joining us tonight, a couple other questions we ask is if anybody's looking for an enhanced employment, if they have any employment opportunities to offer our members. Have a minute to go here if anybody. We do have a career board on our external website, asq.org, and what's called a job board out on our My ASQ community. So they're both available to you. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and re-mute everybody. There we go. And continue on with the presentation. So just a couple of announcements. Of course, with this whole COVID-19 pandemic, ASQ has announced, of course, that it has canceled the World Conference in May. Also, they have canceled all of their certification exams, at least through April. The testing firm that they use, Prometric, will revisit the decision here soon, and they may extend that for a couple more months. But for now, if you were signed up to take an exam through Prometric, you should have already received some type of communication from them that they're postponing it, and apparently they will work with you to set up a new date. Obviously, with the COVID and social distancing requirement, all face-to-face courses are canceled, at least through May. Again, ASQ will revisit that. But it sounds like with the latest announcement, those two, anything that's face-to-face is canceled now through August. They still do offer virtual training and webinars. So if you go to the ASQ training catalog, you can do courses by, either classroom led or virtual instructor virtual or the webinar. And latest and greatest updates from ASQ around its operations and service. Bookmark this website that you see, asq.realland/COVID, and that's where you will find the latest information from ASQ about its. And because of that decision now, all of our program meetings will be virtual from April through August. We had a tour coming up that had been planned for July with Cranial Technologies. That's the local company that manufactures the helmets for infants due to misshapen heads. And they gave a presentation to our group several months ago. And now we are in the process of setting up a tour. Obviously, we will have to reschedule that to a later date, but it is still in our queue. So Vic Nanda is our program chair, and he's trying to move that and find a new speaker for that date. I would like to reemphasize and prepare everybody that's a member of our section anyhow, that we are in the throes of developing and soon to launch a member experience survey. We really want to know, what are your expectations of section participation? When you joined ASQ, you were assigned a section based on your zip code. And as a member, you receiving our Sundial newsletter if you opted in, and you're receiving my chair's message if you opted in. And of course, we have the website where we also communicate our program meetings. But the survey is going to be launched using email. It will just be a link. And from that link, you will be directed to our Qualtrics survey platform. This will not be a short 5-question survey, as you may be familiar with for our post-program surveys. This will be a down and deep experience survey. We really want to understand, what are your expectations and how can we improve? So this will be a more lengthy survey, but it is a survey in which you can always come back to if you can't finish it at one sitting. Not that it's going to be that long. We're trying to keep it to 15 minutes or less. But if you have the need and you can't finish the survey in one sitting, you just come back to where you left, with the caveat that you have to use the same device, because the system does track your IP address. We do not know who it is. This is an anonymous survey. We will not know your name or have your contact information. You choose to give it to questions where we are asking if anybody's interested in, for example, giving a presentation, or if they're interested in serving on a committee or as a leadership role. So there are opportunities where you can choose to provide your name and contact info. But otherwise, the survey is completely anonymous. But again, it's going to go out by email. So, and we would like to get as many people to participate as possible. So what we would really like is for every one of our members to go in and check your ASQ profile. Log into asq.org, go over to my account, and then within my account, click on the opt-in, opt-out, and just to see what are you currently opted in. This is a screenshot of my profile, and I'm opted into everything. And then if you don't have a green check next to section communication, I guess I'm begging you to please go in and do select that. And then go to your communication preferences and at least check email, because that's how you're going to get the link. And once you're done with the survey, you can go back in, and if you wish to opt out again from any communications, that's totally up to you, and you do that. But again, in order to get as broad of representation of our members as possible, we do ask that you please opt in so you can take the survey. All right, just a few updates. I know I show this every month. I just wanted to keep it top of mind and to review our progress with our membership. This is our strategic plan for the year, and it's displayed using what's called an X matrix. And so we start with the ASQ top-down type of objectives, and then we determine as a section what are the things that we think are important that we work on this year. So an annual objective. Make sure that there's alignment with what headquarters wants us to work on. And then within these objectives, you can have more than one strategy or top-level improvement plans. So you can see we have quite a few in orange that would fit under the strategy of developing a quality management system and work to improve our processes. So those are more to the operations of the section. The others are more external facing to you, our members. And then, of course, we have owners assigned to each. So we have a primary owner and a secondary. And we are monitoring our progress. This is the scorecard that we review every board meeting. So we've got all 12 of our deliverables listed. Of course, we started out in the year red. But as we got our project charters completed and we've defined the problem statement and what are the expected deliverables, we now turn yellow, and then we're making good progress in quite a few of these. Some of these are still yellow, but that's fine. We have quite a few months to go yet. The one thing that may slow us down is this identifying a community service project. I guess given the COVID-19, wherein you can't get together at least till the end of August, that could significantly curtail what we're able to do by the end of the year. Quite frankly, this one may drop off just because of unplanned circumstances. We have now identified the charter, and we're starting to develop a strategy of migrating you, our members, to the My ASQ platform. ASQ headquarters is making it pretty strongly voiced that they would like to see all member units discontinue their external, just to better manage branding, make sure we have a consistent message, look, and feel. So again, we're trying to encourage all of our members to go out to My ASQ, create their profile, so then they can, all of the information that's currently available on our external website is already being populated on My ASQ. So right now, for the leadership, it's dual entry, but we will continue to do that until we get the migration plan fully documented and we can see good progress of our members moving over and looking at My ASQ. So we are beginning to track that. So these are the number of new profiles created on My ASQ specific to our section. So on average, we're looking at 6, maybe 7 members per month creating a profile on My ASQ. However, with 800 plus members, that's you can do the math. That's quite a few months. We need to accelerate that quite a bit if we are to try and get the bulk of our membership moved over by the end of the year, which is our external website subscription currently expires. So whether we choose to renew or not will depend upon where we are at with our member migration. So another plug for ASQ. So thank you for listening to me and the welcome and announcements. I would like to move forward with our why you are all online, and then that is to hear from our guest speaker, Cyndi Laurin. Her presentation tonight is on moving the front line forward, how to engage employees to create optimal customer outcomes through improving the manager experience. Cyndi has over 25 years in facilitating learning and organizational development. And you can read all the text as well as I. I know Cyndi personally gave a presentation earlier, and I've attended some sessions with her. Cyndi is also the author of Catch, A Fishmonger's Guide to Greatness, and more recently called The Root Factor. There's the video of her, a picture of her catch. And also the Rudolph Factor, finding the bright lights in your organization to drive innovation. And that's detailing the transformation of the Boeing C-17 program. So again, a little bit about Cyndi's background. She's a sought-after keynote speaker. She's on Twitter. She's on LinkedIn. If you'd like to network with her, she provided her LinkedIn address there. And a little bit about the presentation tonight is recognizing that innovative products are the primary focus of most leaders. But a Gallup poll that was done, 20 years ago now, identified that 2/3 of the workforce are not as engaged as we would like to be. So if you don't have an engaged workforce, it's hard to deliver customer satisfaction. We would like everybody to give their utmost and not wait for direction. So it's all building a culture of quality and customer focus. And managing is, as he says, is not parenting your staff. Managing is of observation and providing clear, regular feedback. So with that, I will turn it over to Cyndi and take it away.
Okay. So let's
clicking on that.
What's that?
We'll see if clicking on that resume.
Oh yeah, let me see if I can get that to
resume sharing or whatever.
Actually, I think it's that little button is not. Let me see if I can find it here. It looks like I have to reclaim the host role before I'm able to share again.
Okay, I just made you presenter.
Okay.
Hi, Cyndi.
Hi. Okay, let me see if I can find my, where is it again? Okay, so let's see if this works without anything.
Yep, there we go. I can see your first screen.
Okay, very good.
So should I attempt to unmute everybody in case anybody has a question during your presentation?
I think what I would suggest is, you know, it's hard because I can't see if someone wants to stop me or pull me off the screen. But I think they can unmute themselves. And so if anybody would like to jump in, cut me off, interrupt, no problem. I'm used to it. Just go ahead and unmute yourself and stop me in my tracks. So that will be completely fine. And then we'll also have time at the end for a question and answer session. So either way works. I don't, with the slide deck on, I don't have access to view the chat box. So if Bill or if you, Bob, could maybe wave me down if somebody has chatted a question, and then I can respond to those as well.
Okay.
All right. Very good. Well, I'm super excited to be here. This book, I think you can, this is the latest one. It's called Be a Frontline Hero. And I wanted to share a little information about how this story came about. As Bob said, I actually started off my career in the academic world and taught at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo for 10 years in the industrial technology department. So I am a very technically minded person at heart. And in that environment, I've realized that a lot of people that are very technically oriented move into management and aren't necessarily given the skills to be a good manager. And when I worked with Pike Place Fish, I actually spent a year working at the fish market with the guys in Seattle, and it really exposed me to really how you don't have to have an MBA necessarily to learn how to be a great manager, although the path to get there hasn't been very clear. And so over the last 20 plus years, I've worked with a lot of young managers who are very well skilled when it comes to their job itself, which naturally leads them to, you know, the great news, your supervisor, now what? And some of the most simple conversations become very difficult when you don't have a system to manage people by. And so I have the photo there of the parent, you know, scolding the child because we don't have anything to fall back on if we don't have a set of management, like a system that we know when this happens, we do this, and this is how we manage that scenario. We literally default to the way that we were parented. And so if your parent was a yeller, you might be a manager that yelled at your employees. Or if you were a child who, you know, your parents sort of rolled over and let you get away with everything, then that might show up in the workplace as well. And it's really no fault to anybody. It's just that we're missing that management system. So I've been working with a lot of young managers more recently in some of the roles that I've had, and just the pattern of being asked, you know, oh, my staff member came in late today, I don't know what to do, and oh, I don't want to have that difficult conversation, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. And so this book, Being a Frontline Hero, really grew out of that. And in essence, this story, before we jump into the tools, it's a story about a young person named Emily who works at a pizza shop, and she's very good at her job, and her manager is horrible, and he ends up getting fired, and she is promoted into the management job. And because she's such a good worker, she thinks this is going to be a breeze, I got this. And then very quickly she realizes she's in way over her head. And by the good fortune of a customer coming in who kind of saw the scenario and offered to give her some guidance, she learns 5 tools in 5 days, and those are the tools I'm going to share with everybody tonight. Because it isn't as complicated as we want to make it be. It really isn't. It really comes down to some specific language and an intention. So as we move into the tools itself, and I give a little bit more information from what I've seen over the past almost 30 years. I'm getting old. The career paths I've seen for the technically minded, such as myself, you know, we're really great at what we do, and that leads us to this manager position. And the skill set that got us into that management role isn't the same skill set that we need to be an effective manager. And there's this little tiny part in the middle there where you can see engineer and manager. That's the common part that that can help us in our management role, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting the bang for our buck from our staff or from our team. So what a lot of us end up doing, I took a little different path, but most of us that are technically minded or strong professionals in our field, we end up in the sea of MBAs. And we feel like getting an MBA is going to give us the tools we need to be a great manager. And I worked with a lot of MBAs. Not all of them are necessarily great managers. Not to say that an MBA isn't valuable, but I think what most people go looking for in terms of how to really manage isn't what they necessarily get out of an MBA program. So I tried to break down, you know, from my experiences, you know, what are those most important things that anybody could start using right away, today, tomorrow, and start to see the needle move just a little bit. We're not looking for earth-shattering team change tonight, but we are looking to move the needle a little bit every day. And the more that we use these tools and habits, the more that we find the effectiveness growing. So I'll be touching on some different stats and research as we go through, but all in all, I'm going to keep this pretty simple and straightforward. A lot of the tools that I talk about are ones that we've all heard of before, but I'm going to present them in a little different light so that you can get more out of the tool itself, because without the methods really driving that tool, the tool's not going to do the work for you. It really has to come from you, the manager. So before we get started on the first tool, I think it's probably wise to share my definition of management and my definition of leadership so you can see the lens that I look through. And there's a lot of them out there. So the way that I look at leadership is, and I'll explain where I came up with this, but I look at leadership as a demonstration of my commitment to the success of people around me. And the reason I came up with that definition is because several years ago I was doing some leadership development training, and I found it very interesting that the senior leadership team was looking to their employees to lead from where they were. And the employees were looking at the senior leadership team saying, hey, you know, you're the leader, lead. And I thought, wow, why is it like this? And is there some way that we can define it where people can lead from no matter where they are in the organization? And so when I thought about what does it really mean, the greatest leaders and people that I've read about or worked with, it really was that they had this knack of demonstrating their commitment to the success of people around them. It was really about that person pushing them and growing them into wherever they wanted to go that caused the leader to be truly, truly amazing. My definition of management is a little bit different also. It is, I try to keep everything super simple. There's 3 elements that I talk about when it comes to management. As a manager, I think our first job is to provide resources to our team. Our second is to remove obstacles from our team. And the third is get the heck out of the way. So oftentimes we try to do so much, and really our team wants to do it. They want to be successful. They want to figure things out. And sometimes we unwittingly get in the way of that. So when I combined my lens of being committed to people around me with what resources do you need, what obstacles can I remove, and then I'm going to back off and let you do your job. And what happens is some really amazing things. The workers get to experience pride that you can't give them, that has to come from within themselves, and they get to experience gratitude. And those 2 things I've found really tend to engage employees over a sustainable long period of time. And this is super important because the stats are not good. The stats are telling us that about 66, 67% of people, especially our younger generation, are actively looking for a new job within 30 days of getting the job that they wanted. So in this kind of economy, well, not in this kind of economy because everything's a little bit upside down right now, but in a normal, healthy economy, hanging on to your talent is a really important thing because it's costly to run through turnover, the loss of production, the trying to get people ramped up to be productive again, and keeping them engaged in the work itself. So those are my 2 definitions. I think it's important to recognize those because I do think a little bit differently, and the language that I use for my tools is a little unique as well. So the first tool, if you're taking notes, which I'm a big fan of note-taking, is the huddle. And if I could see all of your smiling faces right now, I would ask for a show of hands of who's heard of the huddle, because every hand in the room would go up. Most of us know what the huddle is. Thanks, Bob. Most everybody knows what the huddle is. And oftentimes, oh, I think I saw a question. Are the slides not rolling? Can you see my slide called the huddle? Bob, can you see my slide?
I see the slide fine.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I just had a little pop-up to show that it was about the slides. So, oh, gotcha. Oh. Okay. Thanks. Excellent. There might be a little delay from when I forward the slides, so thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. So the first tool, the huddle, again, we've all heard about it before. When I work with companies and I ask about how often they do huddles or how their huddles are going, I usually get a, man, I hate our huddles. A waste of time. And so when I look at why that is and how we can use this really powerful tool to our advantage, there's a few things that stand out. And so on the slide, I'll walk through those together. The first and most important thing that I have found with the huddle is it has to be brief. We're not talking 20, 30 minutes of catching everybody up to speed on what's going on. The huddle is a very, very brief 5 to 10 minute standing meeting to create a shared goal for the team for that day or for that period of time that your huddle is transpiring. Oftentimes, too, I find managers make them very complicated, and it's difficult for people that they're wanting to get into their work. So sometimes the huddle takes them out of the engagement, mentally engaged piece. There are some things that are important depending on the type of work that you're in. Oftentimes, I recommend sharing, the action of the day. What's the most important thing that we need to accomplish today? And as the manager, your role is really to use this as your to-do list to find out what obstacles are in the way of your team from accomplishing things and what resources that they need. And an example of this, I'll give a couple of examples. One was an example of when I was working at Pike Place Fish. Every morning we had a morning huddle, we had an evening huddle. And in the morning, because it's a perishable product, obviously, the guys would say, well, what do we have to move today? And at first it was kind of interesting because I'm like, don't you want to sell everything? I mean, what would make a priority over one kind of fish over another? And very quickly I learned that they did have a system. So when there was a certain type of a product that needed to move in a certain day, we would have a lot more energy around that product, and I would be handing out samples. That was my job while I worked at Pike Place Fish, to hand out samples of salmon or whatever the case may be. So there was a strategy, and there was behavioral actions that we could do to really further or move the needle on that action for that particular day. And accomplishing is much different than saying, so, hey, Cyndi, what are you going to do today? Well, I got a bunch of meetings and some emails, and then I think I'm going to, take a walk out on the floor and see what's going on. No, that's every day. Let's talk about what I'm actually going to accomplish. And there's something to be said for accomplishing something that puts a sense of urgency to it, but it also gives me the chance to really think about what can I accomplish? What is within my purview that I have the power and the resources to actually accomplish. And if there's something standing in my way, from the next bullet there, are there any barriers preventing you from accomplishing your goal? Well, if I'm the manager of this huddle, I'm going to be taking notes as to what the barriers are. And if in 6 weeks, 6 days, 6 months, my team is still complaining about those barriers, I'm sorry, but that is my fault. That is me as the manager not doing my job and helping to remove those from the team's goals. Now, I understand not every barrier can be removed. Sometimes we have to figure out creative ways to work with barriers that are in our way. But for the most part, I'm talking in a normal environment. The manager that should be the to-do list on helping the team to be more successful. I do a lot of lean training and efficiency type training, and Tim Woods is one of the kind of entry-level lean trainings that I do. And so the other suggestion I give to managers is to use Tim Woods, starting off with transportation and inventory motion, and each week have your team, focus on one area of waste. And if the manager is running out of things in the huddle, which, the pace of business is so fast, so it's hard to run out of things anymore, but in those times where things are humming along nicely, then it's nice to be able to have some type of a framework to continue moving your team forward. So the huddle is one of my favorites. I often get asked, well, how often should I do a huddle, or how often should we be meeting, or my team is virtual, so how do we do the huddle? Well, we're doing a huddle right now. It's a long one, but we're all kind of in the circle together here. So we can do them virtually if you're on a team that's dispersed in different locations. But for the most part, I would say you need to do a huddle as often as the pace of business constitutes the need. So without huddles, what I tend to see is job creep and other symptoms of problems show up because people get off to the same page pretty quickly. So the huddle is just a way for us to keep together. Okay? So moving along to the second tool, this one many of you would have heard about as well. If you would spend any time with me, you would know I'm a big fan of observation. And when I think about management, I think management really is the practice of observation and providing regular, clear feedback, both positive and constructive, to your team. That is your job. And it's difficult to be in a place of observation when you're so buried in your own work or in your office that you're not able to get out there. So the second tool in the Frontline Hero is, I call it the position to notice, but we also know this is the walkabout. And I'm sure many of you have heard about or read about the walkabout. It's not a new tool. It's one that's been around for a very long time. But I like to call it the position to notice, because if I'm not in a position to notice, I'm not going to see what my team is doing well and where I can provide those resources or remove obstacles for them. So, you know, it's really easy to get tied up with your own work that needs to be done, but when you're an effective manager, you have to be very intentional about the effort you spend on your team itself. So observing them has to be a priority. I don't think that's very common practice so much anymore. I mean, we tend to catch our employees when something's not going well. We don't spend as much time catching them doing something right. And oftentimes this is where a lot of my young managers, I teach at Benedictine University, so I end up with a lot of young managers, 22, 24 years old, and they get out there and they really don't know what they're supposed to do. I mean, they know they're supposed to manage the budget and they're supposed to plan and they're supposed to have a strategy, but they really, observing their team isn't part of the DNA. So this provides some very clear instructions about when and how we need to be in a position to notice. Another interesting point, I was working with a client out in the East or the West Valley. I live in the East Valley. And when we got to position of notice, it was very interesting. When we walked out on the manufacturing floor, I noticed some of the employees were kind of throwing these hand signals like, oh, there's somebody on the floor. And it took about maybe 45 seconds for the entire floor to have changed the behavior. The tone of the floor changed. And I didn't say anything, and we walked around and toured the facility some more and came back inside, and I said, how often do you guys go out there and take a look around? And they really had to think about it. I was like, oh. Clearly people are not out doing their walkabouts if they can't remember the last time they walked out on the floor, and except for when there was a problem, and that's not being in a position to notice. So we have to very intentionally, physically and intentionally step away from our work at hand. And I know that's hard for a lot of us to do, including myself. And in the early days, because a lot of these are habits, I had to literally put a note on my calendar to be in a position to notice. And it wasn't easy. A habit takes 66 days to break. So if you can imagine, it's really easy for me to find a higher priority than being in that position to notice. But what happens is in time, you start to find the lulls in your day, and when being in a position to notice makes the most sense for you. You have to make sure that you're in a place where you can actually see and hear your team members. Oftentimes we have, I've been in lots and lots of facilities where the office and the manufacturing floor is just separated by some plexiglass windows, and taking a peek out on the floor is not what we're talking about here. This is literally getting up, walking out, and it's a good opportunity to ask questions. I don't mean going out there and saying, why are you doing this and how come this is like this, but really the help me understand. If something that you're looking at isn't making sense to you, then it's a good opportunity to understand what's going on. We're going to get to two tools after this that are listed here, the keep it up and the adjust, but really before we jump into those, we're looking for, and the key to all this is specific observable behaviors. So if your staff or your team isn't clear on what the expectations are, you're going to find yourself defaulting into parent mode. And so those have to be really clear, even if it's like, well, everybody should know this. We can't make those assumptions. We really have to lay the expectations out. That's our job as a manager, to make it really clear. And then the kicker here, and I'll repeat this once after we get through the adjust, is to be sure to balance 3 keep it ups with every adjust. A keep it up is a way to go, you're doing things awesome. The adjust is level setting expectations, which I'll talk about more in a second. The balance of 3 to 1 is based upon some research. I'm working with a local company in town who has done a lot of research around how engaged employees are with constructive feedback when they're only given constructive feedback. If the manager doesn't ever come out and say, you're doing a great job, then when the time for the constructive feedback comes, they're pretty, zombie-ish. They don't want to hear it. But when you've been giving them and some positive feedback, and then you come up with the constructive feedback, they're much more open to listening. And that's where the 3-to-1 has sort of been the magic ratio for constructive feedback. So, and management is the practice of observation, and practice makes permanent. It doesn't make perfect, but it does make permanent. Right, so moving right along here, let's talk about keep it up. You know, our culture is kind of funny about praising others, why we are the but I do know when I work with managers, if I say, well, how often are you out there letting they're doing a good job? And a lot of managers will say, I do doing a good job. And I'll ask, you tell them they're doing a good job when it's the normal expectations of their job. I usually get a, well, no, the normal expectation. So, you know, even the normal expectations of the job are great opportunities to tell your team that they're doing great, keep it up. However, there's a caveat here, as there always is when it comes to language. If my boss was to come up to me and be walking by and see what I'm doing and be like, hey, Cyndi, great job, and then they walk off, I may not really be clear as to what I'm doing well in that moment that got to keep it up. I'm happy I got it. But if my job is complex or if I'm just doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm not sure how what I'm doing is moving the business forward. So the key on this slide is really looking for specific observable things. And I created this 4-step process, and I use this on everybody. I use this on my 12-year-old daughter. I use this on my parents. I use this on my students. I use this on colleagues. The reason I use this very clear language is because I have found that it disarms a constructive conversation, which we're going to talk about next, but it also opens the listening to positive reinforcement or telling people that they're doing a good job. So I always start with the specific desired behavior that is aligned with the company goals. And even if that is the normal expectations of the job, I always start with, you know, I see you're doing this, or I heard that you're doing that, or I understand something to be true. I try to stay away from I believe or I think, because it's really easy for people in their own minds to kind of discredit a belief or a thought. But when I say I saw it or I heard it or I understand something to be true, it just has a little more in it, and the employee is more likely to open up their listening and hear what I have to say. I always share the impact of that desired behavior because they need to really know that, you know, when you do this, whatever that action, that specific observable behavior is, it moves us in the right direction, and that's big. People want to know that they have a ripple effect in the company. Nobody wants to just go in and, you know, do something that doesn't have an impact or meaning. And particularly our younger generation, they want to be making an impact. And if they know what behaviors are driving impact for the company, you're going to see more of those. It's also thank the employee for doing that specific behavior. You know, hey, thanks for reaching out to that customer today, even if that's their job. You know, thank you for reaching out. I heard how you were talking to them today, and you know, your tone was great. I liked how you solved that problem for them. It really does move us in the direction we're trying to go, and acknowledge their contribution to moving the company forward. This makes people feel as though they're part of something bigger than themselves. So when you walk by and say, hey, Cyndi, good job, you know, tap me on the back and walk by, I mean, that's nice. But most managers tend to just, you know, give me a thumbs up or throw a Starbucks gift card our way, and it doesn't really make me feel like I'm doing something important for the company, which is why we see a lot of turnover within 60 to 90 days of people, younger people who are just getting the job they wanted. They just feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. So reinforcing specific desired behavior lets your team members know that you've noticed and that you care. It's one of those ways that you demonstrate that commitment to their success. All right, moving on to the 4th tool. These are really simple. I try to keep it super simple for us. That doesn't tell you anything, so let's go on to the next slide. The 4th tool is called the adjust, and we're going to spend a little time on this one because I think this is where a lot of managers get caught up in the parent role instead of we're just having a conversation about moving the business forward. And, you know, at the bottom of the slide here, it says, team members cannot fix what they're not aware of. And so oftentimes when, you know, they think that they're doing something correctly and then all of a sudden they get in trouble for it, it can be a little bit disenfranchising to your team member if they really didn't know. And I've been in situations where because some companies still operate by an annual performance review, you know, how horrible is that if you've been doing something incorrectly or ineffectively for 6 months or 9 months, and finally the day of your annual performance review, you're told, wow, you know, you weren't doing that correctly. You're like, ah. So people want to know. They want to know if they're not doing a good job because otherwise they're going to continue doing it. So the purpose of the adjust isn't to get anybody in trouble. It's not to discipline anyone. It's really just to level set expectations and correct specific undesired behaviors. So oftentimes I use the example of you know, raising my daughter who's 12 now. When she was very little, I found it difficult to discipline her for something that she didn't know was right or wrong. We do that just because that's kind of how we learn to parent, but it doesn't necessarily help the person understand what the expectation is. So before you can walk into and using the tool of the adjust, you have to make sure that your team knows what the expectations are. Even if this is an assumption that we've all lived by for a long time, it takes 5 seconds just to say, just to make sure we're all on the same page, you know, this is the expectation. And oftentimes it's simple stuff where young managers get into trouble. You know, my staff member keeps coming in late, and I keep telling them not, you know, to be on time, and it's not working, so I'm going to write them up, and there's going to be a performance plan, and it's like, no. Level set the expectations. Let's start off small, and then if we have to go down that path, we can, but let's not jump straight to HR before we can literally manage and get the employee to self-manage and understand what the behaviors are undesired and desired. So much like the keep it up, this is very unemotional. You start by stating the specific undesired behavior that you observed that's not aligned with company goals. So if you saw somebody didn't handle a customer experience well, or you heard something on the phone that wasn't what we had trained on, then we start with that. You know, I saw this, I heard this, or I understood this to be true. And it's important to not be in a state of anger or, you know, emotion as a manager. You know, you have to step away and give yourself a little time before you address these behaviors. And I mean, even with my kiddo, if I'm really upset about something, I'm going to say, you know, we're going to talk about this. I'm going to take a minute, and then I'll be back to talk. And then starting with the I see, I hear, I understand, again, it disarms the team member to really listen to what you have to say. And if you're looking through the lens of a commitment to people's success, it's going to come out right because that's what you're trying to do. So the second part of this, though, is you really want to share the impact or consequences of the undesired behavior that you've seen. So there is a ripple effect for things that are not aligned to the direction the company wants to go. And so you want to make sure that they understand that. And, you know, when you just don't show up for work, it causes the rest of the company to have to fill in for you. And then other things get dropped, and it causes this effect that you may not be aware of. The third one is really my favorite because as a manager, I know I'm guilty of this as well. I make a lot of assumptions as to why people made that decision that they did or why they chose that. So I always like to ask the person, you know, help me understand why you made that choice. You know, give me some context around it, because I might find that the reason that they gave me was nowhere near what I assumed to be true. And it's much easier to get back on the same page when I can understand where they're coming from. And the last one, this one was added more recently. Before I started with, you know, moving forward, this is what I expect from you. But I think it's a little more powerful to get kind of an I will commitment by asking them instead of telling them, you know, moving forward, you're going to do this, asking them moving forward, you know, what are you going to do the next time the situation presents itself? Or by when can I expect to see you, you know, doing X, Y, Z? And again, that balance of 3 keep it ups for every adjust is really important because the listening, it's really easy for us to shut down when we feel like we're being attacked. And that's not the name of the game. We're really in a company together to move in a direction to solve a problem or fulfill a need for our customer, and that really specific, clear communication is a really easy way to get there. All right. My fifth tool, as you can imagine, we have to have one sports analogy in here, right? My fifth tool is called the block or the tackle, and I also add the handoff on there because I think this is where we get derailed a lot as managers. We have a lot of things on our plate, and problems and concerns, projects, new ideas. You know, we're constantly kind of being barraged by a lot of information. And the block or tackle and the handoff sort of helps us prioritize what we have to address right now and what can wait for later. This one took me a little bit longer to work into my practice because I do practice what I preach, and I struggled a little bit with this because I tend to be a person that wants to address everything right away. And my justification for it was, well, if I have the time right now, I'm going to address it right now. But then I found myself getting so overloaded and trying to keep up with everything coming in that by the end of the day, I was completely burned out. So I've learned to identify a regular lull or a slower time of the day where things slow down for me. And this was hard for me to find because I was never looking for a lull. I mean, when I had a lull, I was probably in grabbing something to eat or using the restroom or doing something to catch up. So I really had to pay attention to my day to see where those slower times of business occurred. And after a while, I did determine there are some patterns where I have a small window where I can table things. And so I do use that time, and this is really true for a lot of people in IT, where there's constantly, you know, help desk tickets and things coming in, and they feel like they have to respond to everything, and it's hard to prioritize at times. But if you can find that block, a 15 to 30-minute block, that you literally block it off, and you can work in an uninterrupted fashion to manage daily issues and distractions. I saw a little message pop up, but it disappeared. So maybe if you could grab that for me. I'm not sure if it just kind of popped up.
Yeah, I see a question. It says, in the first huddle tool, there was a mention of identifying waste starting with T.
Mm-hmm.
This person misunderstand the point.
Oh, so the Tim Woods, is that what the question is?
Yes, yeah, Tim Woods, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Tim Woods is just a lean framework that has 8 different areas where people can look for waste in the company. And so I'll take a quick tangent to answer that. It's and we can talk about this more afterwards. But it really helps. The framework helps teams, especially in manufacturing, but in most businesses, identify where there's excess in transportation, inventory, motion, waiting, over-processing, over-production, defects, and in skills. And so I've used that as a framework each week. You know, week 1 we do transportation, week 2 we do inventory. So it's just a nice framework to use the huddle to get everyone on a kind of an efficiency train. So
was T related to transportation or T related to Tim Woods, the manager that was causing waste?
Related to transportation. That was a good one. Yeah. Yeah, I love Tim Woods. It's really easy to find. If you Google Tim Woods, you'll see the whole picture of it. But don't do that right now because I'm not done yet. All right. So thank you for the question, by the way. The block or tackle or the handoff. Once you've identified that waste, you have an uninterrupted 15 to 30 minutes where you can actually manage daily issues and distractions. And so what I've learned to do now when things come my way, I still have to very intentionally turn off my, let me tackle this right now because I have time. Do I have to tackle immediately? I mean, is a person literally, you know, hairs on fire, waiting for information from me right now? And honestly, what I've learned in doing this for quite some time is that, you know, a very small percentage of time. I mean, I could use the 80-20 rule, but people, it's not always an immediate thing that I have to tackle immediately. You know, can I block this event until my dedicated 15 to 30-minute block? Or even better, if I've been really working on developing my talent, my team, can I actually hand off or delegate this to somebody else who is qualified to handle it? And really, you know, the idea of thinking like a quarterback is, you know, the quarterback doesn't win the game, the team wins the game. And so if there's opportunities where the quarterback can hand off to somebody else and let them take it downfield, that's fantastic. And other times, you know, they got to do the work themselves. You have to do it quickly. But not everything has to be managed in a reacting to fire kind of a scenario. And I think we tend to get caught up in that, particularly with the pace of business and the amount of information and noise that comes into our daily lives. It's easy for us to get really caught up in that. So finding those blocks, and for some people, depending on, you know, when I'm coaching, I'll recommend one block during the day. For others, I'll say, you know, you really need 2 blocks. You need one sort of in the first half of your day, and you need another block in the last half of your day, because their pace of business is such that people can't wait until that second, you know, that later time. So, you know, it's really kind of a personal preference in terms of, you know, how much you get bombarded with. And I guess what I don't have on this slide is really finding a way to distinguish between the noise that we're bombarded with every day and actual issues and concerns and projects and new ideas. Because there's nothing worse as a manager than having an employee who's very engaged come to you with a new idea, but you're so busy reacting to all the fires going on, you don't take the time or effort to listen to that new idea, which could have actually resolved something that you've been working on. So the blocker, tackle, or handoff is a very, very helpful tool when it comes to managing our time. So when I click on the next slide here, so in Be a Frontline Hero, you know, Emily, my main character, and by the way, this is the book, Be a Frontline Hero, is my first fable-based book. The others were, you know, real stories about real companies, Pike Place Fish and the Boeing C-17 team. And I decided to try something different with Be a Frontline Hero, and it's done very well. It's being very well received. And what the HERO stands for, because I get asked that regularly, is what you see on the screen now. It's really participating in huddles every day, keeping that sense of focus and a sense of urgency on what's most important, engaging and being in a position to notice so that you're able to observe opportunities to provide a keep it up and an adjust, or an adjust. Remembering to balance 3 keep it ups for every 1 adjust, to keep the listening open to both, and to only tackle issues with an associated deadline or hairs on fire kind of deadline, and then you know, block and hand off the rest. So that was really my goal, to share with you the 5 different tools. I've been working with companies. It's been really fun lately. Been doing lunch and learns and really walking through almost just like Emily does in the book. And I create some scenarios, and we do role playing, and it gives managers an opportunity to actually practice with the language, because it's never easy or comfortable when you're using specific language. And if I back up here, oops, going forward there, when I back up to some of the specific language, like in the adjust or in the keep it up, it feels clunky at first. It feels unnatural. And so having an opportunity to practice in the sandbox with other team leads, I have found to be a really powerful experience. And then usually, because most of us forget what we've learned within, or we actually forget 70% of what we learned within 24 hours if we don't practice it. So when we do Frontline Hero training, the assignment is always, you have to do a huddle before I see you tomorrow. You have to do a keep it up with your team. You have to do an adjust before I see you tomorrow. And then the beauty is that our next meeting, you know, we start off by troubleshooting. You know, what went well with your adjust? And what didn't go well? And sometimes it's like, well, I gave the adjust and the person just said, okay. It's like, okay. So let's talk about that. So really understanding that the language, to me, language is really critical. it might seem like subtle little words and things, but they have a very powerful outcome on team members. And I've seen it work really well when kind of the emotion and the parenting is taken away from the management experience, and then the customer's experience gets to be so much better because you're really, really engaging your people at that point. So let me come back down to that last. Oops, we got another. Okay, so I saw part of a message come up and then it disappeared on me. It kind of like pops up and fades out.
Yeah, I will unmute shortly. I know David Gibson had a question pertaining to the huddle itself. Any thoughts on what do you do when you have members that work across different shifts or time zones?
Right, that's an excellent question. So oftentimes if they work on different shifts, if it's possible, I don't know what the scenario is per se. Sometimes I'll have the huddle that has the members of both shifts together, because if it's 5 or 10 minutes, it gives them that quick time to pass off information between the shifts that may have been lost if we don't have that huddle. I prefer doing a beginning of shift and end of shift huddle, but that means I have to manage my team's time well, because nobody wants to stay after their shift to do a huddle. So we have to build that. Actually, it has to become a priority to the company that we build it in. But usually shifts that are adjacent to each other, I like to have them come together. It's hard if it's like a large group of 30 people, that makes it difficult. I'd like to break it down by function or by process or by product or something to keep it around, 8. I don't really like to go above 8. Sometimes I'll go to 10, but I try to keep it nice and small so each person can give what they're going to accomplish, what's standing in their way, and what that action of the day is. So I hope that answered the question.
Okay, and with that, I will unmute everybody. So if you do have a question, please feel free to ask Cyndi.
Yeah.
All right, everybody should be unmuted.
Okay. Do you want to take back the hosting so we can see I'll be able to see the chat a little better too? Or maybe I might have to stop sharing. Oh, here, that's what it is. Okay, so I stopped sharing, and then I think the host could come back to you. Just a second here. Are you able to take back the host?
Oh, I probably can.
And I think then I can see the questions in the chat too when you take that part back. I think I see one here if I can get down to it. Oh, there's that one. Okay. Right. Oh, here's another one.
So
let me see, there's another one here. If I can get a little bit better. If we tackle the issues associated with deadline, then will it not result in delaying all other issues? Maybe other issues not associated with the deadline but not tackled today may soon turn into an urgent priority. Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the block or tackle, I mean, you have to know your business. I mean, obviously better than I do. I don't know what business that each person is in, but really the goal is to be able to find that time during the day where you can address blocked issues, but you have to know the level of urgency that's associated to your role. And obviously, if it's going to delay things down the pipeline, that's not a good idea to block that one if people are relying upon that information.
Okay. Any other questions, Cyndi? Okay. I see a few people have their microphones self-muted. So if you are trying to speak, I unmuted everybody, but some individuals are still muted. So,
Cyndi, this is Harold Johnson. I had a lot of trouble with that. Can you send a link or something to this material?
We did put a copy of the slides out on our asqphoenix.org website and also on our My ASQ community. So
okay.
They are out there. Okay.
Yeah, and I have the book. It's on Amazon. You can find it there. It's, I priced it super cheap. It's like I think $3 for the ebook and $7 or something for the print copy. What I have found is it's really powerful to have a team read it together. It takes, you can see it's very thin. It doesn't take long to read, and it helps to get people using the same language together.
Okay. Am I the only attendee?
What's
Pardon?
that?
They just show showing just the name, and I'm the only attendee.
Oh, there's 34 people on the call.
Okay. Used WebEx 1,000 times. Didn't have this kind of difficulty before, so I apologize.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? If not, well, thank you very much, Cyndi.
Yeah,
Your
thanks for
time
having me.
and putting your material together for us.
Sure.
I think
Hope it was helpful.
I've been to the Pikes Market in Seattle, and it's always a good show. But it's like, well, so how does this show enable or facilitate employee engagement? I know you had a similar dialogue. If you could share some of that discussion.
Yeah. So interestingly, the Pike Place Fish Market is a very very financially lucrative place. And you wouldn't guess it, but when I first learned about the fish market, it was through the book called Fish and the video that came out, a long time ago. And what I had read in the fish book, it was all outcomes, and I wanted to understand what was driving those outcomes of the play and make your day and all that. And when I called the fish market and said, help me understand, they said, oh, that's part of it, but it really is about our intention and our commitment and integrity. And I was like, what is this? And so they really have a system. And one of the things that they do very, very well, in addition to huddling at the beginning and end of every shift, is that they set their monthly financial goals as a team. And, it's not, they make hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, at least at the time that I was there, and I'm sure it's not gone down much. But they base it upon their performance the previous year and who their teammates currently are and what they think they're capable of. And then basically they run what their financial goal is on their on the office computer on a ribbon, and every day they see how close they are to meeting that goal. And they literally adjust their energy level based on how they are encroaching upon that monthly financial goal. And it's pretty amazing. And I learned a lot from, I did get locked in the freezer and I got hit by a crab in the back of my head one day in the wrong spot. So they do have a lot of fun. But what's interesting to me is that the fun that they have is really based upon a pretty resolute management system, and their commitment to each other being successful is like nothing I had ever seen before. It's pretty impressive. Yeah, and then with Boeing, the reason I started working with the C-17 team, not only because they were awarded the Malcolm Baldrige Award, because that's huge, but to me what was so fascinating, and I've been, kind of dinged on not getting into the actual quality elements, which I'm well aware of, but what was most fascinating to me was how they got 10,000 people aligned around moving even in that direction. I mean, that's really the story. And so their employee engagement piece and, making sure that people were on the same page and using communication, they called them practitioners, and I call them Rudolphs because we think a little differently than the rest of the herd. But, really fascinating story of how to engage people into moving the business in the direction it needs to go.
Good.
4 years with them. That was a long project that I loved every minute of it.
Great. Good. All right. If there are no other questions, again, thank you. And I just have a slide or two to share. So you will be getting a thank you. Everybody will be receiving a thank you email from Bill Hottie, our Voice of Customer Chair, and in that email will be a link to please rate your satisfaction with the event and please give us feedback. This was our first experience with WebEx events, so don't be too harsh, please. But do give your honest feedback.
And Bob, that's only for those I got email addresses from. So.
Okay. And hopefully we'll have many email addresses that once the meeting ends and we get that report generated. So, yes. And let's see. So next month, we have our very own Vic Nanda, our program chair, who will be giving a presentation on the same platform, same time, on May 14th. Presentation titled, Define the Right Metrics Aligned with Goals and Objectives. Vic, are you still on? Would you like to say a couple words? Let's see. Vic's still here. Oh, doesn't look like Vic dropped off. All right. And at this point, we usually have a member raffle and speaker's gift. A little hard to do that with an online program, so we will resume that definitely when we get back together in our face-to-face sessions. But again, do want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. And if you have any suggestions for future topics, or if you've heard a great speaker that you'd like to perhaps hear from again, please let us know. Until then, everybody, please be safe, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great presentation.